I didn't fall in love in a cafe or on a dance floor. I fell in love under fluorescent lights, sitting on a couch that squeaked when I shifted, across from the man paid to untangle my secrets. This is the story I never meant to tell, but I am. If this resonates, tap subscribe, share compassion, and stay with me until the last breath of this story. Please listen. I used to think love announced itself with fireworks, some grand overture that swept you into a movie montage. But the truth is, most love shows up softly. It sneaks in like the hum of an air conditioner, steady and unremarkable, until one day the power cuts out and you realize silence has a shape and it hurts to hear it. That's how my love arrived. Not as a jolt, but as a tide, first touching my ankles, then my calves, then my chest, and by the time I named it, I was already underwater. I live in Chicago. The city taught me to carry an umbrella even when the sky looks clear. It also taught me to tell the truth, because the wind will strip you bare whether you want it to or not. Back when this started, I was 31, working as a content strategist for a nonprofit that did housing advocacy. My desk was a thin rectangle by a window that overlooked a bus stop. On winter afternoons, I watched people press their hands into their pockets and hunch against the cold while I wrote fundraising emails and press releases with urgent in the subject line. Outside, the city kept its rhythm. Inside, I kept mine, tired, anxious, hungry for something I could not name. My father had died 2 summers before, and grief had slipped into my daily life like an extra layer of clothing. I wasn't crying every day anymore. Mostly I was functioning, but I had a constant ache. I woke up at 4:17 a.m. without fail, eyes wide, heart working hard for no reason. My shoulder blades felt taped to my ribs. Food tasted like cardboard. And then there were the panic attacks. 2 of them. Full workday fireworks I didn't enjoy, the kind that leave you shaky for hours. My friend Maya took my hand at lunch one day, squeezed it across a plastic diner menu, and said, "Caleb, it's time to talk to someone who can help." That's how I found myself on the 23rd floor of a building off Michigan Avenue in September, walking into a therapy office that smelled faintly of lemons. The waiting room had a rug that looked expensive, and a plant I recognized as a fiddle leaf fig because I had killed 2 at home. I signed in, tried not to stare at anyone, and then a door opened and a man said my name, pronouncing it like he wanted to keep it safe. "Caleb?" I stood. He was taller than me, but not by much. Early 40s, maybe. Kind face. Lines at the edges of his eyes like parentheses. Blue tie, but a jacket he'd tossed on a chair, like he wanted to be formal and comfortable. He shook my hand, warm, firm, and said, "I'm Dr. Whitaker. I'd like to hear what brings you in." We walked. His office was a long rectangle with a couch that seemed to recognize my weight and accept it, a chair for him, a small wooden table where he set his notebook and a glass of water. A piece of abstract art hung on the wall, the kind of painting that looks like a storm learning how to calm down. Out the window, the city stacked itself into blocks of light. He sat, angled slightly toward me, then waited. The waiting was what made me talk. "I'm here," I began, "because everything works, technically, but I feel like a house wired wrong. Like if you plug in a lamp, it might turn on the fan across the room." He smiled gently. "That's a vivid image." He let silence do its quiet work. I found myself telling him about mornings that felt too loud, afternoons where my mind jumped like a DVD skipping, evenings when I put on a TV show and didn't remember a single character's name. I told him about the heavy brick of grief in my gut, and how I had developed an expertise in leaving parties early. "And your father," he said softly, after I mentioned him with a shrug that fooled nobody. "Tell me about him." I did, and in the telling it felt like I was taking off a winter coat inside a warm room. I didn't share everything that day, but I shared enough that when I left, I had the sensation of having set something down. We agreed to meet weekly. On Tuesdays at 5:30, I rode the Red Line to Lake and walked the last few blocks watching the river slip green under bridges. It was autumn learning to say its name. The days thinned out and the wind sharpened. I came with a list of things to discuss, a tense email from a colleague, an unexpected wave of sadness at a CVS when I saw a father and son in the toothpaste aisle, the way I sometimes felt like I was a bad friend, not because I meant to be, But because I didn't know what to say, he listened. That's not a small thing, though the word makes it sound like nothing. He listened like listening was an active verb. Sometimes he asked a question that was so simple it rang like a bell. What did you need that you didn't get? Or, if that part of you could speak, what would it say? Sometimes he gave me language I could carry. A word like transitions or ambivalence that made my inner chaos look less like a tornado and more like weather with a forecast. When my anxiety made my breath short, he said, "Let's take a minute." He breathed with me, slow and easy. We watched the second hand on the wall clock do what it does best, move forward. If you've never been in therapy, I'll say this. Some of it feels like a gentle archaeology, brushing dirt off a bone until you recognize the shape of it. Some of it is like learning to name colors you've seen all your life. And some of it is two people in a room trying to be honest, which is harder than we give it credit for. I didn't fall in love right away. If anything, I was suspicious of love in all its forms. I'd had a few boyfriends. There was Ian, who looked like summer and acted like January. There was Mark, who loved my jokes but not my silence. There was the handful of dates where I had smiled so much my cheeks hurt and then returned home to a sink of dishes and a quiet so loud it hummed. So when exactly did my heart course correct towards him? I can point to moments. The time I cried so hard my chest ached and I apologized for being dramatic. And he said, "Your tears belong here. They're not extra. They're information." The afternoon I was late because the elevator stopped between floors and I had to make a phone call to the emergency intercom. And I arrived shaken and embarrassed, and he said, "It makes sense that was scary." And I felt seen instead of scolded. The morning my mother called and told me she found an old sweater of my father's, how it smelled like his aftershave. And I brought it into session, and he held it with me. Hands overlapping mine, not for long. Just long enough that I knew I wasn't the only one keeping my dad alive. It wasn't about his tie or his eyes or the way he said my name. It was about safety. It was about the first person in a long time who asked to see everything and didn't flinch. That kind of safe can feel like love to a person who has lived with the opposite for too long. One December Tuesday, snow pressed against the office windows like a curtain. I sat with my coat still on, a cup of coffee warming my fingers, too caffeinated to digest, too cold to remove a layer. He asked about the holidays ahead. I told him I planned to visit my mother in Indiana and how I had already braced myself for the silence of the guest room, the creak in the hallway where my father had paused halfway down the stairs to adjust his slippers. He nodded. Then he asked, "How are you doing being here?" I looked at him, surprised. He added gently, "Not just in this story. In this room," I said the safe answer. That it was helpful. That I appreciated the space. He waited. He often waited just long enough for me to find my actual truth. I looked down at my hands. They were the hands of someone who had been wiping kitchen counters for years, who had typed thousands of sentences, who had covered his mouth in movie theaters when he laughed. I stared until the letters on my skin read something else. Then the words arrived, quiet and heavy, like snow inside. "I think I'm in love with you," I said. He didn't jump. He didn't smile. He didn't look away. He took a breath. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "That takes courage." I looked up. My face burned. I wanted to take the words back and also push them farther into the room so they didn't live in my chest anymore. "This happens," he continued softly. "Often. There's a name for it. It's called transference. It's when feelings from important relationships get stirred up and attached to the person in the room who is helping you untangle them. It can feel like love, and it's still true that it is meaningful. Can you tell me what this love feels like?" I had expected rejection. A polite rebuke. Professional, of course. What I didn't expect was care. He turned toward me, a degree or two more open, like he was making room for the truth to sit between us. "It feels," I began, "like I'm safe. Like you get me. Like if I could just stay here on Tuesdays forever, everything would work out." He nodded. "That sounds like a longing for safety and consistency. Those are human longings. They can be a part of love. Does it feel romantic?" "No," I said quickly, then slower. "It feels like I want to keep you, to have you close. I want to be special to you too." His mouth tightened like he was holding compassion there so it wouldn't spill too fast. "You are special to me, in the way a therapist holds a client. That's real. It's different than romance, and it's also a feeling we can explore together, because it tells us something about what you need and what you've missed." He talked a little about boundaries, not like a rule book, but like the edges of a picture frame that help you see the painting. "Can I still come?" I asked, voice small like a child's, and I hated that about myself, my neediness. But he smiled, warm as a blanket. "If you want to," he said, "and if we can keep talking about this openly, we can continue for now. I also want to consult without sharing identifying details, just to make sure I'm supporting you ethically. And I want to make a plan with you. If these feelings start to harm you, or make the work hard in a way that isn't helpful, we might talk about a referral to another therapist, so you can have space to do the work without this complication. How does that sound?" The next sessions were careful in the best way. I never felt like a specimen under a microscope. I felt like a person with full access to his own experience. We spoke honestly. We named when my stomach flipped because he laughed at something I said. We noticed when I dressed up a little on Tuesdays and why I felt silly about that. He told me when it felt like I was editing myself to be charming, and I could feel my father in the room then, my father who believed that love was earned by being useful. We set boundaries like traffic cones, visible, protective, movable if the street needed repaving. 3 months later, as cold loosened its grip and the lake looked less like slate and more like a mirror someone had started to clean, I broke down. I had walked into his office holding it together like a person trying not to spill a cup filled to the brim. I couldn't do it anymore. I cried loud and ugly. I said I couldn't stand to leave at 6:30 and hate my apartment again. I said I didn't want to go on dates with men who asked me about my favorite neighborhood sushi place, while their eyes scrolled through a mental checklist. I said I just wanted to be here, where the rug hugged the floor and the lamplight softened the edges of everything. He spoke carefully. "I hear how painful this is, and I'm noticing that our work together, while very meaningful, might be bumping up against something that could get in the way of your healing. I want to bring up again the option we discussed, transitioning your care to another therapist. Someone I trust, someone who can help you continue to grow without this particular complication in the room." I knew he was right. It made me angry, and I knew he was right, so we made a plan. He referred me to Dr. Jasmine Lee, a therapist across town with an office full of houseplants that actually thrived. He told me he respected me, that our work mattered to him, and that a transition could be part of the work, not a failure of it. He offered me a few final sessions to say goodbye, which might sound formal, but was exactly what I needed, a ritual. Those last appointments were a kind of gentle goodbye I'd rarely experienced. We walked through what we'd learned, that my anxiety wasn't a personal defect, but a tender alarm system that needed recalibration. That grief does not end, it evolves. That I had a heartbreak history that had taught me to work for love like a job with no vacation days. He told me again, deliberately, that what we had was real in its container, and that the container was ending because it had to, for my sake. He didn't send me into the night. He sent me toward a new light. Then, because he is who he is, he did something that was both ordinary and holy. He set down his pen. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Caleb, working with you has been an honor. I care about you. I am cheering for you from a distance. And after we close our professional relationship, I will not contact you. If, in the future, you feel moved to reach out, I ask that you wait. At least 2 years, ideally more. Not because you did anything wrong. Because boundaries protect the work you did, and they protect you. And even then, I may not be able to engage socially, depending on many factors. Do you understand?" I did. I didn't like it. But I understood. He was building a bridge across a river I could not yet see, and asking me not to try to cross it until it was safe. The last day, we didn't hug. I cried. He did not. He handed me a tissue box with an economy we'd developed. 1 tissue, the good kind, pulled and ready. We said goodbye, and I walked into an evening that refused to decide between rain and sunshine, and then I went home and lay on my couch and let my heartbreak have me. The weeks that followed were a peculiar blend of relief and withdrawal. I met with Dr. Lee, who sat in a rocking chair and wore cardigans the color of ocean glass. Her voice had the warmth of a steady kettle. She didn't try to replace what I'd lost. She honored it. She asked about my attachment to Dr. Whitaker. She helped me explore where that attachment touched older wounds. A father whose love arrived in acts of service. A mother whose love arrived as worry I learned to soothe by minimizing my needs. A childhood where I was praised for being delightful and punished with silence for being too much. We named the ways my body learned to perform for approval. We practiced what she called radical ordinary life, waking up, making coffee, walking even when the sky threatened rain, packing lunch, texting a friend not to be witty but to be honest. I dated again. It was clumsy. I spilled red wine on a guy's sleeve and apologized 6 times. I went to the Art Institute with a teacher named Luis, who had a smile that made me think of sunlight on a kitchen table. We kissed, and it was nice, but I felt my mind cataloging the moment for later analysis rather than being in it. I took myself to movies and let myself leave early if I wanted to. I bought a plant and kept it alive. 2 springs rolled into each other. I turned 33, then 34. I learned how to sleep past dawn sometimes. The city changed its outfit, and I did too. I ran on the lakefront trail in a way that would be generous to call running, but my feet moved faster than walking, and I counted that as a miracle. I learned to cook a risotto that did not turn into soup. I taught myself to say no without a story attached. At work, I asked for a raise and stopped apologizing for calendar invites. I went home on holidays and stayed in my mother's quiet house and brought music. Not loud, but present. We found a rhythm that didn't feel like walking on broken glass. And then, one day, I saw him on a screen. It was an announcement for a community lecture series about mental health in the workplace. The speaker list scrolled by on my phone as I ate lentil soup at my desk. There it was, Aaron Whitaker, PsyD. The name landed like a coin on a table. Real, ordinary, irrefutable. I stared until the soup cooled. Then I put my phone down and did the thing I had learned without even knowing it. I breathed. I told Dr. Lee, who asked how I felt. I said steady and shaken, which made no sense until it did. We talked about boundaries and time. She reminded me that in Illinois, and in the code of ethics of many mental health professions, romantic relationships with former clients are prohibited for at least 2 years and often discouraged beyond that, and that the power dynamics don't just vanish with the calendar. She asked, "What would be compassionate for you?" I said, "Not going," so I didn't. I went home and made pasta and watched a documentary, and when the credits rolled, I noticed I had not thought about him every minute. Life doesn't ask permission to keep happening. I kept writing for work. I kept reminding myself that the night was long but not endless. One summer afternoon, I walked by a bookstore in Andersonville and saw a sign for an author talk, Grief and the Stories We Tell. I went in. I bought a paperback with a blue cover and a spiral of white birds. The author read a chapter that made my chest ache and then laugh in the same breath. When the Q&A ended and people stood up, I stood too, and then I saw him. He was across the room near the back, talking with a woman in a green dress. He was older than when I last saw him, which made sense because I was too. His hair had silver at the temples. He wore a navy blazer with jeans and a cautious smile. The bookstore air felt suddenly thinner. I wanted to leave. I wanted to stay. He saw me. Recognition did not crash into his face. It rose slow, like dawn. He didn't step forward. He didn't wave. He nodded once, a small hello that asked me to choose. My body chose. I walked over. "Aaron," I said softly, and it felt like a tender word in my mouth, both forbidden and familiar. "Caleb," he said. He didn't reach to touch me. He didn't pretend we were strangers. He spoke like a person aware of 1,000 unseen threads. "It's good to see you." "Likewise," I said. My heart did an old trick, beating fast like a drum roll, but the room didn't spin. We stood there, 2 men in a bookstore, 2 lives that had once shared a small office with a lemon scent. "How are you?" he asked, and the question had the weight of history but didn't dig. "I'm good," I said, the word landing with surprise and truth. "Working, running terribly, sleeping better. You?" "Well," he said. "Busy. I've been doing more community work." He gestured to the author at the front. "Old friend." "I try to show up." We stood in the awkward ease of people who care and know better than to rush. Then he did something gentle and exact. He said, "Caleb, I want to be transparent. It's been more than 2 years since our work ended. I want to be clear that I will not initiate contact beyond this moment. That's my ethical boundary. If you choose to reach out, if you want to, there are considerations, and we would need to take great care. But I want you to know that I'm here, in the city, doing my life, and it is genuinely good to see you looking well." I nodded. "Thank you," I said. I meant it. We parted. I walked into the late afternoon, the sky soft like a peach. I went home. I sat with what I felt. It was not the old tide. It was something quieter, like the way the lake looks in early morning before boats cut the surface. I waited. On purpose. I waited 2 weeks. I spoke with Dr. Lee and told her that I was considering sending a letter. She asked me to consider. Why? What would I hope for? What would I do if the answer was no? We talked about power dynamics still being present even after time, and how the most ethical therapists will be cautious because caution is a form of care. She asked if I could be okay without a romantic outcome. I said yes and felt the yes ring true like a bell. It's funny how you can change without noticing, and then the evidence of your growth shows up in the words you say without your voice shaking. I wrote a letter, not an email. I wrote with a pen on paper that had my apartment address printed at the top because a friend had said adults do that, and sometimes I liked pretending I was one. I wrote, "Aaron, I hope this is okay. I know that our work ended with care and with boundaries I respect. It has been over 2 years. I have continued therapy with Dr. Lee, and I am doing well. I'm writing not because I expect anything, but because our last meeting in that bookstore reminded me of something I want to honor. I would like to invite you for coffee. Only that, no expectations. If that is not appropriate for you, I will understand and will not contact you again. If it is appropriate, we can discuss what care and clarity would look like before we meet. I do not want to compromise your ethics or my well-being. Thank you for the work we did. I am better for it. If this is the end of our communication, please read this as gratitude without obligation. Warmly, Caleb." I mailed it. I waited. A week later, I got an email, not a letter. It was from him, concise and careful. He thanked me for the care in my words. He said he wanted to be respectful of professional ethics and of the potential complexities. He said he had consulted his ethics board and a supervisor to make sure he navigated this correctly. He wrote, "If we are to meet for coffee, we would need to be explicit about our history and about boundaries. I am no longer your therapist and will never be again. If we meet, it will be as two adults, with awareness of the power dynamics and with ongoing supervision on my end to ensure integrity. If you would still like to meet, I would be honored to talk about how to proceed." I cried when I read the word honored, not because I felt chosen, but because I felt respected. There's a difference, and it's everything. We did it slowly. We had a phone call first. He said, "I want to say this plainly. If at any point you feel pulled back into a therapeutic dynamic, I will step back. Your well-being is the priority." I said, "I understand. I have support." We named things like an inventory: motives, fears, hopes, hard lines. We agreed that we would not talk about therapy content beyond how it affected this decision. We agreed to keep my ongoing therapy with Dr. Lee active with her knowledge, because transparency is a non-negotiable when the water is complicated. Our first coffee was at a place on Clark Street with a patio and a habit of playing quiet jazz. I wore a blue button-down I had owned for years and didn't fuss over my hair. He arrived exactly on time. He always had. He wore a gray sweater and a smile that was not a therapist's smile. That mattered. It was subtly different, less absorbing, more present as himself. He did not ask, "No, how are you doing?" with that extra layer of concern. He asked it like a man who wants to know, not a man who is responsible for the knowing. We sat. We talked, not about the shape of my sadness or the origin of my anxiety, about books, about city construction, about how the coffee shop's pastries were slightly stale, but in a way that was charming. He told me about his sister in Oregon who had become a beekeeper at 53. I told him about Maya's habit of sending me ridiculous memes at 2 a.m. He laughed. It landed gently. We were two humans on a patio, with the lake a mile east, doing its ancient work of moving and reflecting. It took time to trust that this was real, and that it could be good. We were careful. We saw each other every few weeks at first. We didn't call it dating. We called it meeting. We let the word date arrive organically one day when he said, "Can I take you to dinner?" And then paused, correcting himself not because he didn't mean it, but because he did. "I mean, would you like to go on a date?" I said yes. We went to a place with a chalkboard menu and a waiter who cared deeply about anchovies. We talked, we listened. We did not tell the waiter our origin story. People ask sometimes, not out loud, but with their eyebrows or the way they step slightly closer. Was it strange? Was it awkward? Was it wrong? The answer is that it was strange, like learning a new route home. It was awkward, like the first time you leave a coat on a chair in someone else's kitchen. It was not wrong because we did not make it wrong. We built it like you build a house in a windy place, with extra nails, with attention to the directions the gusts can come from, with a porch where you can put on your boots and think before you go into the storm. We kissed for the first time on a bench near the lake. It was summer pretending to be spring, the air light and the sky insisting on showing off. He asked, "Is this okay?" I said yes. Our lips met like a question asked and answered at the same time. There was no music. There were joggers and a dog that wanted to meet everyone. It was not cinematic. It was somehow better, ordinary and precise and exactly ours. We made rules that were really rituals. We checked in regularly about power dynamics. "Do you feel like you can tell me no?" He'd ask, and I'd answer truthfully. I could, because he made it safe to say it. I told him when a tone reminded me of the office. He apologized and adjusted. He told me when he felt a familiar urge to take care too much, and he stepped back. I stayed with Dr. Lee, who supported me without turning our relationship into a case study. She asked, "Do you feel free?" I did. Not everyone was thrilled. I told Maya, who arched an eyebrow like she was aiming for the moon, and said, "Well, okay, I trust you. I will also have my eyes on him like a hawk." She liked him. It took a minute. She asked him pointed questions over tapas. He answered with composure and humanity. He didn't over-explain. He didn't charm the room. He kept circling back to how he wanted me to be okay, independent of him. My mother took longer. "Isn't that—" she asked, leaving the sentence like a cliff. I thought that wasn't allowed. I told her the truth carefully. It wasn't. While I was his client, it isn't now. We waited. We did it right. She pressed her lips together, a habit I inherited. "I don't want you hurt," she said. I said, "Me neither." She met him at Thanksgiving. He offered to do the dishes. He did not perform. He stood with his sleeves rolled up and a tea towel over his shoulder and asked her about the recipe for cranberry relish. She told him, eventually, the secret was orange zest. There were bumps. There were nights I woke up expecting the old tide and found a wave instead. There was a day someone left an anonymous review online about his practice, not about him specifically, but it triggered a spiral in me about public perception and judgment. He handled it with integrity. He documented thoroughly. He consulted mentors. We didn't rush to defend ourselves to the world, because the world had not asked us for a statement. We invested the energy where it mattered, with each other, with our small circle of trusted people, with our own therapists and supports. We learned each other's smaller loves. He likes black coffee and a slice of lemon loaf. I like cappuccinos and listening more than talking during breakfast. He keeps a notebook on his nightstand for dreams. I keep a pen because I fall asleep deciding that tomorrow I will be a person who makes lists. He runs farther and smoother than I do, but he will always loop back for me, turning around with a smile and a hand against the small of my back as if to say, "I'm here. We'll go together." I make a pot of soup on Sundays. He chops the onions and tells me about an article he read, then listens when I tell him about a story I want to try to write that I will maybe never show anyone. He holds my hand at the crosswalk not because I can't cross alone, but because partnership sometimes looks like contact. When we finally told the longer version of our story to a small group of friends, we did it with the gravity it deserved. We said we met in a therapeutic context. We ended that relationship with care. We waited. We consulted. We now date with full awareness and support. Some people asked questions. Some nodded. One friend said, "I just want you both to be joyful and responsible." And I wanted to frame that phrase and hang it in our kitchen. We didn't rush milestones. We let commitment be a daily act, not a ceremony. Still, one morning, we were at Montrose Harbor, the sun just cresting, the lake deciding to sparkle, and he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart did the drum roll again. He didn't kneel. He stood, because we have always met standing, both feet on the ground. "I don't want to rush us," he said, and I laughed because this man is incapable of rushing anything that matters. "I just want to say, this is a ring I bought because when I think of us, I think of building a life. Not now, not a big wedding, just a symbol we can choose together. And when and if you are ready, we'll wear them. And if you're not, we'll put it in a drawer and wait. I am in no hurry to arrive anywhere. I want to walk." I cried. Surprise! I told him I wasn't ready for a ring on my hand, not yet. I told him I was ready to keep choosing him with my feet, my words, my grocery lists. He smiled. He put the box in his pocket. We walked. The wind off the water found our faces and made us squint. We squinted into the future together. What I want to say? To you listening wherever you are, in a kitchen with a mug, on a couch with a blanket, at a desk where the light is kind, is that love is more than a thunderclap. It is a series of choices made over and over in the direction of care. And sometimes those choices include saying no to something you want in one season so that it can be possible in another, or so that you can make room for something you didn't know you needed. I fell in love with my therapist. That sentence still makes the air shift. If this were a different story, maybe that love would have broken me. But it didn't. Not because I am exceptional. Because he was ethical. And I listened when my wiser self said, "Wait." Because we respected the rules that exist for a reason. Because we got help. Because we honored the truth without demanding it behave like a fairy tale. There are days we still practice. The muscle of us is still learning. We have a dog now, her name is Scout, and she has exactly 2 speeds, enthusiastic and asleep. On Saturdays, we take her to the park. She chases a tennis ball with a joy that reminds me of what the body can remember when the mind forgets. We eat dinner at our small table. Sometimes I light a candle, not because I need a mood, but because it is a way of saying to the evening, "I see you." Sometimes we sit in companionable silence. Reading separate books, our knees touching, I tell him, sometimes late at night when the city is quiet and the refrigerator hum is the loudest thing in the room, "Thank you for how you handled that back then." He says, "Thank you for how you handled it too." We do not romanticize the past. We respect it. It's a road behind us with some potholes we avoided and some we did not. We hit them and we repaired the axle. We keep driving, slower than a movie montage, faster than fear. There are versions of this story that end differently. There are versions that don't begin. All I can tell you is ours. It is sung in a key of patience with a chorus that comes back again and again. Are you safe? Are you seen? Are you choosing? Sometimes love is the good couch that squeaks in a quiet office. Sometimes it is the hand you don't hold until years later, outside, under a sky that has seen worse and better. Sometimes it is a Tuesday at 5:30, and sometimes it is a Saturday morning with a dog at your feet and a grocery list that says lemons, because the smell of them still makes you feel like things can be fresh. If you're listening and you too are sitting on a couch somewhere, and you feel something that scares you because it feels like love for a person whose job is to help you, know this. Your feeling is information. It does not make you bad. It does not require you to act. It asks you to be honest and to be held by the boundaries that were made to protect you. It asks you to let the tide be a tide and not a flood. It asks you to trust that waiting is not nothing. It is a choice. It is a kind of love. When we walk Scout at dusk, the city does that thing I love where the streetlights wake up one by one like they're having their own conversations. We stop at crosswalks. We look both ways. We go when it's time. It is not a metaphor, and it is. He takes my hand sometimes, not always, because we are not always scripted. He squeezes once. I squeeze back. It is the smallest thing, and it says the largest truth I know how to say, I am here. I am not in a hurry. I am in love. And I am well.